you. Someone's got a megaphone in the back. It's Jimmy Hart. Welcome to Operation Little Mermaid right here at Vintage Villains. Let's give Vintage Villains a big round of applause. Now, I am really happy to be conducting a little interview with the man that you all came to see, Disney animator Philo Barnhart. Let's give a big round of applause to Philo. I've got a hodgepodge of questions here. Hodgepodge of questions here. And they're kind of out of chronology, but I think we'll make do. You know, I've known you for like, how many years? Like 3 years now?
No, only 2. I have photographic proof.
Yes, Charles has photographic proof. By the way, we've got Brian K. Morris in the back selling his awesome books. We've got Charles A. Masson, back there selling comic books, and of course Philo has his booth, and Ripper the Clown has my booth over there full of my books and children's books. And so check out all the vendors throughout the night. Part of the proceeds are going to this play, The Little Mermaid, here that we're doing the fundraiser for tonight. And as I've been rambling on here, is Philo's mic working? Is your mic working?
I don't know, but it is.
Apparently not.
Hello.
Oh my God, you can hear you, Philo.
Could you hear him?
Yeah.
Hello.
Get Philo your megaphone. Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Should I get him the bullhorn?
Okay, what we'll do is we'll switch mics, so go ahead and this is, yeah, throw
Does
that.
that make you switch?
I'll switch over when, okay. So, want to try the side mic?
Yeah, they're both up all the way.
Okay. Okay, hold on, okay.
Come on, fix it, you tech.
I think that one works.
How about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry for the momentary technical difficulties here. So my first question, because I've known you for a few years, and I had the pleasure of interviewing you back at Villains Con about a year or so ago, and we had a really fun interview back and forth. And one of the things that you told me about was you were an extra in Mary Poppins, and since this is a Disney-themed event, and since we're in Dick Van Dyke's hometown, I thought it would be cool to start with that question. So why don't you tell everyone here about how you were an extra in Mary Poppins?
Oh, okay. Well, it was my consolation prize for losing the part of Christopher Robin in the first Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, I think it was. And that was in around 63 or 64. Mary Poppins was being made at around the same time, and I was runner-up with Bruce Rotherman for the part, whose father was directing the short. So, but
What happened there?
I was very proud of it. Proud of making it that far because there were 150 little boys in that audition, and I made it to the top with Bruce, and we did our final reading, and I got to meet Walt Disney and talk to him about how he saw the character, and it was really thrilling for a little kid. I was about 7 years old. So Walt found out later that I didn't get the part, and he knew I'd be probably pretty upset. And he must have really liked me because he asked my father if I wanted to be an extra with my father in Mary Poppins, flying a kite at the end of the movie. But as you probably already know, they shoot everything out of order for a film, especially animation. Nowadays it's because they only have a location for a certain amount of time. But back then, they only had the sets built for a certain amount of time, so before they had to strike them and build another set. So we got fitted for our little costumes and everything, and my dad waxed up his mustache in an Edwardian fashion. He had a bowler hat on, and I had a flat cap, and most of my outfit was brown, and I had white stockings on. And I can point us out, but I don't have the film tonight. So. was kind of an atmosphere person, and we were all flying our kites. And
I remember you told me, because you're in the Let's Fly a Kite scene at the end, and tell me about how the kites were flying, because they really weren't flying, correct? It was.
Oh no, they were. What you did when you came in every day was find your string, which was attached to the soundstage ceiling. They found your color, and then you went to find your mark, which was the same color tape on the ground of the set, and you'd walk your string over there and just wait for makeup to come to you, and apply your basic and powder you down.
That had to have been amazing for a little kid to be a part of a film like that.
But they had it all worked out. It was, like clockwork.
Now, back on, because that was one of my questions too, that you had auditioned for the role of Christopher Robin. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, when Walt Disney found out that you didn't get the role, you were kind of upset. And did you not get a hug from Walt Disney?
No, not a hug, but a firm handshake. But I have a funny story about David Tomlinson, who played Mr. Banks, too.
Yes, that was one of my questions.
Should I tell you?
You didn't tell me about that when I interviewed you last until after the
I didn't
fact.
go into depth about that because I usually tell the one about Julie Andrews visiting me during Good of Men and production, and her telling me that she remembered my father, and then later she told me she remembered me too. So, though I wasn't so little anymore. But during one of the breaks in filming, I went out and I sat on David Tomlinson's lap on the lot on a park bench. And my father was frantic because he couldn't find me. So he was running all over the place. Finally, he came outside and saw us sitting there. And he ran over and said, "Oh, Mr. Tomlinson, that can't be good. My son's sitting on your lap." He said, "Oh, this is your son." He says, "Yes." "Philo, come on." He says, "Oh no, we're having the loveliest conversation." So when it came time to see the movie, when it was all done, came back to the lot and went to the auditorium. And about halfway through the movie, I turned to my father and I said, "Daddy, why is Mr. Tomlinson being so mean to his children?" And he says, "Oh, honey, I thought you understood. That's called acting." I've never forgotten that.
So, now everyone views movies like Mary Poppins as just like iconic. Walt Disney, an icon in pop culture, and everyone, when you hear the word Walt Disney, everyone just has fond memories of their childhood. So when you were taking part in this movie, and when you met Walt Disney as a kid, did you have an idea at the time that this was pretty special, or was this just like an ordinary day in the life of little Philo?
Oh no, it wasn't ordinary at all. It was an extraordinary place to work in. There was movie history everywhere you went on the lot in those days. They had, sets, the houses and things that you remember from seeing in the movies, and they were still there on the backlot then. Most of them got torn out in modern times, and they have where it used to be the Zorro sets is now the Zorro parking lot. Not as exciting, folks, but that's where we parked every day for work, especially during the Black Cauldron when we were working on that. But I knew it was exciting, unique, yeah. Then I had to go back to school.
So I don't know, for some reason I thought you got a hug from Walt Disney, but you got a handshake from Walt Disney. You could charge for handshakes, seriously. You could. Like, if someone came up to give you a handshake, you'd be like, "No, I charge for that." And trust me, at first I think people would be put off and offended, but then when you explain, they'd be getting out their wallet to be like, "How much do you want?" Because, how often can you say that you shook the hand of somebody who shook Walt Disney's hand? That's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it was a special time, all right.
So tell me and tell us about your parents' history with Disney, because I think that it's really cool that they were a part of the Disney company, and then later, when you became an animator, you were with the Disney company.
Yeah. Well, my parents parents came to Hollywood close to around the same time. Actually, my father was serving in the military during World War II. Around 1942, he was stationed in Chile. Well, he was teaching how to use anti-aircraft guns and coast artillery there. And he trained a lot of the people that got shipped over to Europe. And they were pretty busy in those days. And he didn't realize it at the time, but he soon found out that he had a sleepwalking problem. So he almost went over the cliffs in Chile, and an MP grabbed him around the waist. And they said, thank you for your service, but we're sending you back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And they gave him an honorable discharge, and he was furious because everybody wanted to serve back then. So he brooded about that for a year or so, and his friend John Freeman, who had been hired at Disney, called him long distance and said, you really ought to get on a train and come out here, bring your best samples, and you ought to show these guys what you can do. Very, very talented artist. Iowa farm boy, but gave him lots of time to go out in the barn and practice drawing. So where he could be alone, no one to bother him, except the animals. And he and my uncle were going to go into fashion design, but he ended up getting stuck in animation after that. So he did in fact take the train to Burbank, California, and took an in-betweening test, which was the entry level of the business. Back then, that's the person that puts the drawings between the animator's extremes. And you learn to read timing charts and so on. And that's basically how I got into it later. But I don't want to digress from my parents' story. But anyway, by this time it was 1944. And my mother had been working there since '42 in ink and paint. What brought her to Hollywood was a beauty contest that she entered in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. And the prize was getting to be in a movie called 17 with Jackie Cooper and Judy Garland. So that was around 1939. And the girls had to be 17, that was part of the deal. So that was her first taste, and then she came back and thought she would be a movie actress, but it didn't work out. She didn't really want to do that. She had been painting watercolor pictures. And so you probably all know the story that if you were a talented painter of fine art and you applied at Disney, it was a little bit chauvinistic in those days. So you had to be relegated to ink and paint. Sorry to say, but she loved it, and they were all part of the war effort at the time. They did charts for people that were fighting on the open sea. They did silhouettes in ink and paint on celluloids, and they went out to all the ships at sea, all our fighting people, so they could immediately identify, just from the silhouette of the ship that my mother and others had painted, what country it was from, if they were friend or foe, you know, etc. So, not to mention all the propaganda films they made, like Der Fuhrer's Face, and then all the Latin American films, and that's the film that my parents were working on when they met. It was Three Caballeros. That was one of those Latin American package films. So that's how they met each other.
So you were a Disney baby?
Disney brat. But I didn't come too much later. My brother was the first, and he was in '49. Yeah.
So what are some of the iconic films that your parents worked on? Because I know they worked on a lot of the, when you think of Disney movies from that era, they worked on a lot of those films, correct?
Yes. Of course, starting with those early package films during the war, and then right into Song of the South. I think that was '47 or so. And pretty much everything from then on. Ichabod and Mr. Toad. What else? let's see, what was it, 50? Oh yeah, 50 was Cinderella. By then, Mother was at home taking care of the children, so she dropped away, but Dad kept going. And by then, he was starting to move into layout, which is the part of the business where you set the scene. You do the background layout and how the characters are going to move through that layout. You do 2 or 3 drawings showing them moving through the scene, or if it's just a close-up of them talking, just one bus shot. And then the animators do the rest, you know. But, yeah, Cinderella, followed by, I think there was 2 Whistle Plunk and Boom in there somewhere. Donald and Magic Land, which was a short that still gets shown in schools today. Peter Pan in 1953. 51 was Alice in Wonderland. That was a lot of fun for them to do. Didn't do very well at the time. Walt Disney himself felt that Alice lacked heart. She was a little on the cold side, so. But I love that film. It's beautiful.
And now, I mean, Alice in Wonderland is one of the most popular Disney movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's up there with the classics. So,
yeah.
And I remember reading or hearing.
Wait long enough, they become classics.
Yeah. I think that you may have mentioned that to me, that Alice in Wonderland was at the time viewed as a failure,
right.
Which is kind of surprising when you would think about it today, because it's so it's viewed as a classic.
Right, and the man that did the voice of the Cheshire Cat, I got to read with my last time when I was trying for Christopher Robin. That was Sterling Holloway. He was a very nice man.
Yeah, he had
put me at ease right away.
He had an amazing voice.
He did.
Yeah, and he was just like very.
He's also Kaa in the Jungle Book.
Yes.
Yeah, but after Peter Pan was Lady and the Tramp in 55, and that was their first widescreen film for animation. And somewhere in there was So Dear to My Heart. That was early on, and that's when they were dabbling in mixing live action with animation. And they were the first to really do that in Hollywood. And they were successful with it because they used what they call the sodium screen process, and that's the same one they used for Mary Poppins as well. There is such a good removal of any elements you don't want around the live action people that there is no seam around there's no matte line around the people and the animated characters when you put them together.
So, speaking of that, did your father work on Mary Poppins, the animation for that? Since you were
Yes, he did a lot of design work mostly and story continuity. He designed pretty much single-handedly how the Tea Party on the Ceiling was going to play out. And also Let's Go Fly a Kite. He did that whole sequence starting with Mr. Banks coming up from the cellar of the house with the repaired kite. And he's still wearing his hat that's been punched through by the bankers. Yeah.
So, at what point in your life, growing up, did you decide you want to do exactly what your parents have been doing? At what point did it hit you that this was the path you wanted to take your life?
Well, I kind of felt it was too lofty an ambition for me at the time. I was still learning to draw and paint. Thankfully, I was encouraged all through school. A lot of young people don't get that anymore. They don't get the encouragement. There's not even art programs in some schools anymore for lack of funds. But we were very blessed in the 60s and 70s. So, but always encouraged by not only my parents, but my classmates too. So I became like the class artist all through the school system. But what's interesting is that the movie that really got me turned on, if you will, was from England, a little film called Yellow Submarine. And I think it was the same one that got Mr. Charles de Moisant back there interested too. Because the day I met Charles, he was wearing a Yellow Submarine shirt. And I said, oh, here's a kindred spirit. The long hair kind of frightened me at the time. But yeah, we got to talking, and that's how we became friends, over Yellow Submarine again. But I thought, this is different from the Disney stuff, and it's pop art, which I loved, being a child of the 60s. So I said, you know, there are possibilities here. You can do anything you want in animation. It doesn't have to be the Disney style. It can be, you know, pop art, or it can be the anime. It's very popular. And of course, we had all those shows on TV, you know, Kimba and Speed Racer, the early anime stuff.
So when you started animating, you didn't start at Disney, correct?
No. When I was about 15, I saw Pinocchio with a neighbor lady. Asked my parents if she could take me to see it at the drive-in theater. And I fell in love with things that were animated. And went to Disney Studio to ask their advice. And then I was 16, of course, still underage to work anywhere. But Andy Ingman was the man I talked to, and he gave me lots of great advice. He looked through my drawings and he says, you know, the best way to draw hands, for example, is to know what's underneath there. You know, what the bones do, how they move. And when you do get into school and you start to study, please take some live drawing, you know, what do you call it? Well, not anatomy, but life drawing. There you go. So I enrolled in several life drawing labs and learned all I could about how people work and what we look like underneath all this skin. So that helped a great deal. And by way of doing that, you get to see how they behave and how they move and how the muscles contract and expand, and you know, you kind of make a study of how people behave and move, and also animals too.
And facial expressions too.
Yeah, facial expressions, and a lot of animators, even now with the digital things, they still have a mirror by their desk and they'll make faces to see how it looks, and they'll put that into their character. So, but from there, I thought, well, this is too lofty, so I got into studying for product development and advertising, for graphics for that. And I studied that at UCLA. And in the meantime, my father came home from Hanna-Barbera, where he was working by then. This is around 1975 or 6. And he says, hey, they're starting a class in the entry level of the business, which is in-betweening, at Hanna-Barbera. And Harry Love is going to have it 2 nights a week at the studio, so how would you like to come to the Valley with me? Because by then we were living in Santa Monica, which is several miles away. It's down at the beach. So he says, come to the Valley with me. During the day I can leave you at your sister's home, and then I can come by and pick you up. We'll have a nice dinner and I'll take you to the class, and I'll work for a while you're studying. You know, got a lot of layout work done. I was in there studying in between. So here I am in a class with 29 other people who eventually became my friends for life, because we all got hired out of that one class, and we started making TV shows. And the first ones we did, Star Wars came out in '77, so everything went space age. We did Yogi's Space Race, we did Galaxy Goof Ups, we did more Jetsons, new Jetsons, we did new Johnny Quest, we did a show called Godzilla, and I got to develop characters on that. I moved from animation into character design like right away.
So and again, we're kind of limited on time, but where did you, can you just kind of run down like a timeline chronology? You started at Hanna-Barbera and then you proceeded to, was it Don Bluth?
No, from there I went to Ripley Spears, which was a split apart from Hanna-Barbera. And I did Plastic Man and Mighty Man and Yuck and Ricky Rocket. And this series of specials called Puppy Specials. The puppy does this, the puppy does that. So right after that, took a sabbatical and went to Paramount Pictures to work on Star Trek, the motion picture, the very first one. and did hand-drawn effects. Everything was generated by hand then, including all the video readouts and things on board the ships. We didn't have real computer monitors yet. This was 79, so none of that came in until 89, a decade later. So everything you see in the film that you think is a computer is animated by us. And then from there, I went to Bluth's and worked for 4 years with them, did Secret of NIM and Dragon's Lair 2, and Space Ace, the video games. And then right back to Hanna-Barbera and did several seasons of Smurfs when they were brand new. And some other shows, the Paw-Paws, more Jetsons, more Flintstones, more of everything.
Everything that I watched as a kid, this guy had a part in putting it on the screen. It's amazing.
Yeah, around that time I did the titles for Jim and the Holograms too, which showed every week. So you got to see my titles every week.
You mentioned working on the Star Trek film.
Yeah.
What type of experience was that? Because again, that's considered a classic and it's kind of outside your realm, but at the same time.
It was amazing, but yeah, we didn't have a lot of time to socialize or get to know anyone. It was just work. So we were spending the night on the staircase towards the end of production just to get the thing done. So we'd set an alarm and sleep in our sleeping bag, and the alarm would wake us up, we'd go spell somebody else, and they'd go sleep in our sleeping bag for a while. So there's rare times we got to go home to sleep. I would wake up and I'd be pantomiming, drawing over my head in the bed, you know, flipping the paper and drawing. So that was funny.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the kids in the audience today may not know a lot of the cartoons you're referencing. Dragon's Lair, you mentioned Dragon's Lair.
Right.
We're here at Vintage Villains, they have a ton of games. They don't have Dragon's Lair, but Dragon's Lair was the very first video game that was a cartoon.
Yes, and it was the first to be driven by a Laserdisc, too. That was where the problems came up, because that was where the maintenance problems came in. So you saw them just as quickly as they came, they started to disappear because the maintenance fees to take care of those things, because it was a laser. It was the early version. They've since gotten better.
Yeah. Didn't you do Space Ace too?
Yes, we did Space Ace right after Dragon's Lair.
Which is the second.
We were working on Dragon's Lair 2, the time warp, when they had to go into Chapter 11. Yeah.
Now, Dragon's Lair 2, it was never released, was it?
No, it finally came out, but it had to be finished up by another company. But it was still our animation and our voices, more importantly.
Was your voice in Dragon's Lair?
Yes, I'm the Queen of Hearts in Dragon's Lair. Stop that bouncing! Off with the heads!
I had the computer version of that. I've got to play it and hear your voice. I had no clue that you did the voiceover for that.
Those of you that have played Dragon's Lair probably know this guy.
So let's talk about that for a while, because obviously you did voiceovers for Dragon's Lair. Were there any other voices that you did?
Well, we started doing voices with Don, we were like the Don Bluth players. We started doing that on Secret of NIM. We're rats all through the film. Probably my most famous rat is when the block is sinking. And Mrs. Brisby says, "Justin, the block is sinking." And they start scrambling over to try to, you'll hear a rat say, "Throw the line, Justin!" That's me.
Now we've all got to go and rewatch Secret of NIM just to hear that line.
Yeah, there's dozens of lines. He says, "You're gonna say, and you're gonna say, and you're gonna say." So, and Don Bluth himself is Borf, the villain in Space Ace. Yeah.
Now, at the time you were working on these things, our culture has changed in those years, because if something is a big hit today, everyone's got an online social media fan base. Back then you didn't have that.
No.
So you probably knew, through ratings and obviously ticket sales, that something was a success or something wasn't. But did you at the time realize that what you were working on for certain generations were going to be classics, just like the same classics that your parents worked on?
Oh no, that's not what you're thinking of when you're drawing away. No, you're thinking, oh wow, how am I going to get my footage for this week? Or what am I going to have for lunch? Oh, that's what I'll do. No, you're not thinking, oh, this is going to be so wonderful when it comes out. No, you're going to panic to get as much footage done as you can for them in 1 week. But I am very happy that things turned out the way they did.
And so then you moved on to Disney after you went back to Hanna-Barbera and did the Smurfs, correct?
I went to Filmation for a couple of years and did their films. Before that, I did Heidi's Song in 1983 for Hanna-Barbera. And then more Smurfs, like I said earlier, and then they had a last train out party because they were going to move the studio and they weren't sure they were going to be in business anymore. So this was in '84, and they laid a lot of people off. So I went straight over to Filmation and made Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night with them, and then Happily Ever After, which was a Snow White continuation. And then that door closed, and the studio closed down, and Mermaid presented itself right away, and that was, by then it was '87. And so October 29th, 1987, Mermaid entered my life.
And followed by that, Beauty and the Beast, correct?
Sometime after. I had made the Black Cauldron over at the studio, Winnie the Pooh and a Day for Eeyore in '83 also. And then in '84, '85, I spent a little time working on Black Cauldron. That gave me my first taste of Disney, and then I went off to Filmation to work on those things. So I had to backtrack a little bit. But that was the tail end of production, so I don't really count that as a full production thing. But yeah, Mermaid was, got to work on that all the way through and do the character design along with 6 other people, and it was wonderful. And then from there I moved to Florida for the company and helped get the MGM Disney Studio open. And we made a short called Roller Coaster Rabbit, featuring Roger Rabbit. And that was our first film as an independent entity of Disney. And then we started working on the movies with them, starting with Rescuers Down Under, and then finally Beauty and the Beast. And we did another short around that time called Off His Rockers, which I believe showed with...
Wasn't it Roger Rabbit?
I think it showed with one of the movies, I can't remember which one. It was about a little boy whose rocking horse is feeling ignored, and so he tries his best to get his attention, and finally I can't remember how it worked, but it was a really cute film. It was just a short one.
Now, did you work on Roger Rabbit 2, the film, or...?
No, that was being done during Mermaid.
Okay.
But we inherited all their animators because they finished before we were done. And they just came on with us. We inherited James Baxter and Nick Ranieri and Dave Spafford and a whole bunch of people. Yeah.
Now, going to work for Disney, was it kind of surreal for you stepping into a position that your parents had, and then you had obviously been at the Disney studio when you were a kid? So was it surreal to step into that same role that they had?
Not really, because it was quite a different studio by then. Yeah, it was different. Walt wasn't there anymore. They were running things differently. Yeah. So my era was the Michael Eisner era. But the man who became my friend and my boss, Jeffrey Katzenberg, was with me again. It was kind of funny because we met each other at Paramount Studio in '79 on Star Trek. Here he is at Disney Studio in '84. We're together again. So almost a decade later.
Now, because even when Mermaid came out and Beauty and the Beast came out, there wasn't social media. You couldn't really gauge a lot of response other than, again, ticket sales of how popular something was. when you started doing the conventions and started meeting your fans, how did that feel to realize that so many people absolutely love and adore what you have done with your life, and that what you did is a part of so many childhoods?
Yeah, well, that was an eye-opener. Yeah, that was the amazing thing. Yeah, yeah, and I'm still finding that out now in foreign countries too. In China, the last 2 trips I've taken out there, I've been swarmed. So it's just amazing. Yeah.
And you have a book?
There were 103,000 people at this convention, and I saw a lot of them.
You said 150,000?
130,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And
They all loved him and they spoke Chinese.
Some of them were pretty good at English. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I mean, I can. You're sitting right next to me, and I think I could hear Charles on his megaphone better than I can hear you on that mic.
Yeah.
But you have a book coming out soon.
Yes, it's called I Want to See. And,
I want to see
yes. Oh, Brian's holding it up right there.
Brian, please come on stage real quick and say some words about it.
Yes, sir.
I'm the publisher, they both work for me. Oh, well, I can work together.
Come on up here, Brian. Grab a broken mic and let's talk about it. Or just grab Charles's
I'm
megaphone.
theater. I don't need a mic.
He's been so nice to write about this has-been up here.
Anyway.
Brian K. Morris, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. They know me, but they clap anyway. Anyway, what we're referring to is a brand new book that should be out fairly soon called I Want to See, because that's what people say when they watch Philo draw. It shows, hey, I want to see what you're doing. It is about 200 pages, lavishly illustrated with drawings that Philo has made for people during the last 3 or so years at conventions of various Disney characters and characters from other media. And there is a fairly brilliant biography in there by a Brian K. Morris, who has a booth back there next to Jake, next to Ripper the Clown.
Jake's not here tonight.
Oh, I thought I saw him come in. My bad.
No,
my bad.
Watch out for Ripper the Clown, we rich one.
Who gave him that? Anyway. He did. We'll never find him. But anyway, no, this should be coming out soon, and check with Charles at Silver Phoenix. Put that megaphone down. At silverphoenix.net, where we will have details on ordering. Thank you all.
Awesome, thank you.
We just did the final edit, Brian and I together. He's fast.
Brian Morris, everybody. Be careful here with the subject. I don't know how much time we have left because I know the kids are going to do a little performance, but does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Philo? We got a mic, pop on up here on stage and go ahead and ask this fantastic, masterful animator any question that you may have.
Are you single for those who love you?
Not anymore.
Yes, you recently got married.
I have a lovely Chinese bride. Her name is Yaling. And there's my ring.
Now, when did you get married? It was in the recent past, correct?
August 12th.
It was kept a secret for a little bit, wasn't it?
Yes, a major secret.
And then we found about it on social media. Let's give Philo a big round of applause for his recent marriage. And you have a stepson too, correct?
I do. His name is Bowen. He just turned 1. Right after the marriage.
Wow. So you have a ton of exciting, fun things going on.
I do.
So, anyone have any questions for Philo?
Come on, don't act like kids. Ask something.
Surely somebody here has a question for Philo.
Okay, so if you're doing Mermaid, are you doing all of the characters? Do you concentrate basically on one? Did you already cover this?
Well, much later I wrote the book, How to Draw the Little Mermaid, and that included a lot of the characters from the movie, but my main focus was first Ursula, then Sebastian for a time, and then when Dan Haskett finally arrived from New York, I got started on Ariel.
So one person develops them and then teaches the other animators how to do the same thing?
Yeah, there were 3 of us that taught the animators when they came off their own characters. Ariel had the most footage, of course, in the film, but there was a flow chart in the hallway and it showed how many characters there were and how much footage they had. And she started at the top and went all the way to the floor. So as they came off their characters, we taught them how to draw her. Yeah, all 3 of us, Bill Burke, myself, and Glenn Keane.
Can you tell the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell the difference of who drew who?
Yeah, there were like 5 different versions of her in the film, but most people don't notice those things like we do. Yeah.
Where did you get your inspiration for Ursula? There are different things online, but where was the inspiration from?
Well, she started life as a spiny fish, one of those ones that has the poisonous, things, and she was originally going to have a fin in place of hair, kind of a hair-shaped fin, but over time, I gave her the Joker's side tabs. For example, I borrowed his. Sometimes I get asked to draw her as the Joker, so I paint those green. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of elements that came together just like for Ariel, but I credit, big time I have to credit Max Kirby, who was an improvisational actor friend of Rob Minkoff's, that Rob got the studio to hire and come in and play her on video for us. And he came up with a lot of business for her. And being a man in drag, that's where that all came from. It wasn't actually Divine, though a lot of people thought it was John Waters' star Divine that inspired us. And I got very inspired by Pat Carroll herself, the voice, when I just accidentally bumped into her one day. Tell the story? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we started life in some trailers across the street from the main building where they were still making Oliver and Company. So there was a point where they were about to wind up Oliver and Company, and they started moving us across the street a little at a time. So I was one of the first people to get over there, and I still didn't have a room. I was still sitting in the hallway, which is where Jeffrey Katzenberg would find me every day. To ask me questions, he'd just come out in the hall and there I was. So I went out to the receptionist to ask, her name was Dee Haramia, to ask how we could allow visitors to come and see us while we were starting over there. And I went out there and I said, Dee, you're Pat Carroll. And she was on the sofa waiting for them to come and get her to re-record the sequence, which wasn't quite working out. And she was looking through a magazine, and she looks up and says, why, yes, I am. Who are you? I said, my name is Philo Barnhart, and I'm doing you. I mean, I'm working on you. I mean, I'm working on Ursula. And she laughed, and she said, well, then you come over here, and you tell me all about it. So I run over, I sit down next to her. She says, now, what was your name again, dear? I said, Philo. She said, oh, that sounds Grecian, is it? I said, yes, very good. Well, tell me, Philo, what is it exactly that you're doing with Ursula? I said, well, Rob Minkoff and I are trying to finish the final design. We're trying to get her pinned down. Because as you already know, this is the first sequence we're starting with, and we've got to get her going. And she says, yes, I'm here to re-record the sequence, and I'm just waiting for them to come get me. I said, oh, okay. And she says, well, would it help if I gave you my take on her? I said, oh, yes. I thought, oh boy, here comes the gift. How often does that happen? And she says, well, don't laugh, but I see her as this great Shakespearean actress who retired into the sea for some reason. I said, that could work. So I said, you're talking about body histrionics instead of vocal histrionics, which was the problem we were having with the sequence. And she says, exactly. She says, that's how I'm going to handle it today. And I'm going to have all hell break loose when I get to the song. And that's how we're going to work it. And she says, it will work this time. I said, well, I certainly hope so. Good luck to you today. And I went back to work, and the drawings were just sailing out of my pencil. So that's where all the body language came from. So from her and from Max Kirby doing his, on the whole, I've been a saint. That came from Max. And the rest came from Pat. So the no talking, singing, zip, wasting away. Everything was over dramatized.
Do we have any other questions for Philo before we close? Because I know that we're on kind of a limited schedule here because the kids want to perform.
Oh, that's a Jeffrey Katzenberg story. Yeah. Well,
yeah, let's hear it.
We have what's called dailies or sweatbox every week at the end of the week on Friday. And we had to have 3 of them because we were getting so large. Our little theater couldn't hold everyone, so everyone had a scheduled time. Well, lucky me, I had my time with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He went ballistic in there because our first test of Ariel had not a brassiere, but seashell pasties. Not only did she have seashell pasties, but they were moving independently in the water current to show that there was underwater current. We ended up using her hair for that because we didn't want to get murdered by Jeffrey. So he was like the little boss in The Incredibles. He was red-faced, and I saw him get up out of his seat and walk quietly, red-faced, up the aisle and out the door. Dailies weren't done yet. I went back to work after dailies in the little hallway there, where I still was. And I saw him go into the director's room down the hall, close the door, and I heard the voices rising. And then he comes out, still red in the face. He says, so Philo, what are you doing for lunch? I said, well, Jeffrey, I expect I'm eating. He says, no, you're not. You're going to do me a seashell brassiere and you're going to have it ready after lunch. I said, okay, you don't say no to Jeffrey Katzenberg. So I did 3 drawings of her with her arms up like this, turning, and I put together a seashell brassiere for her, and that was that. Yeah.
Now, just a super quick question here before we end, because you mentioned The Incredibles, and we had talked about this before. What are your views on CGI versus the traditional animation that your parents did and that you did? When you watch that today, how do you feel about it?
Well, how do I feel about the new process? Well, I, like a lot of people, thought there was room for both formats, because if you've got a great story, you can really animate in anything you want, any format you want. They're still making puppet animation too, which I think is great. And that's something that the digital stuff closely resembles because it's all rendered and it looks real, like real puppets. But that's basically what it is. It's puppeteering with digital wireframes that somebody else fills in with, the lighting and the texture mapping and all that. So I'm kind of grieving over the loss of cell animation. I think there's still room for everything, but what studio heads erroneously believed was that people were flocking to the movies because they were in the 3D digital animation process. But the truth was that the stories were so great, especially the Pixar ones. And they like us on the hand-drawn stuff, work very, very hard on the stories before they ever start animating anything.
Okay, well, I think we need to close. Okay, go ahead. One last question.
Ariel be from? What ocean? Mediterranean area?
Atlantic.
Picture from?
I believe it's the Atlantic Ocean.
Atlantic.
Yeah.
Kingdom is called Atlantica.
Atlantica. However, the girls, there's 7 of them all together. They represent the 7 seas. That was the idea, the underlying thing. And if you line them up just right, they make a rainbow, because they're all different colors, their tails. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to skedaddle off stage so the kids can give us a little preview of the Little Mermaid play that they're going to be doing here. So let's give it a big round of applause for Philo Barnhart coming down here. Thank you, Philo. It's always good to see you. I'm going to shake the hand that shook Walt Disney's hand right there. You know, we've had some people on the stage. We had one guy who wrestled Bill Goldberg on a comedy show. We had another comedian who'd worked for Barack Obama. Me, Ripper the Clown, I was kissed by Vincent Price's daughter's dog. I was, that's true. It happened, I have witnesses. And now we've got someone on the stage who shook Walt Disney's hand. That might top them all, I think. Yes. So let's hear it again for Philo Barnhart.